Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us for the session, Latino Youth and our Digital Democracy, Civic Engagement, Access, and Empowerment in the 21st Century. My name is Flor Canales, and I am the CHCI New York Life Public Policy Fellow. For me, it is important to discuss how new technologies can empower youth to partake in civic engagement while simultaneously increasing their accessibility to accurate information. So I'm really excited to listen in on this conversation this afternoon. On behalf of CHCI, I would like to thank the Omidyar Network for their generous support of this session. The 2022 midterm elections featured dozens of competitive races between Democratic and Republican candidates vying for seats in Congress, state legislators, and other offices. Through all of this, misinformation circulated widely the days before and after the election on various digital platforms. We will hear from a panel of distinguished experts on how new technologies are empowering civic participation for Latino youth and how they are working to ensure the future of a digital, multiracial democracy for the nation. And it is now my pleasure to introduce today's moderator, Maria Jose Urbina. Maria Jose Urbina is the managing director at the Indivisible Project, with nearly 15 years of experience in Senate leadership, high-profile electoral campaigns, and the progressive movement. In her leadership roles at the Indivisible Project, Maria built the organization's political department and designed a grassroots federal endorsements program that in 2018 helped usher in the most diverse class of progressives in history. Before joining Indivisible, Maria spent the 2016 election cycle running Voto Latino's voter engagement and national campaigns as Vice President of Politics and Campaigns. So please welcome our moderator, Maria Urbina.
Thank you. What a warm welcome. Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. How's everyone feeling? Yeah? Vibey? Vibey for the Latino Youth panel? Great. All right, well, let's get started. Thank you so much for coming today. We're really eager to have this conversation. And what better time to have it than after young people showed up for this midterm election. So we feel really lucky that we get to have this conversation that is centering young people, young Latinos, and civic engagement, and all of the ways that we look to engage our community, as well as organize around some of the real challenges within our community. We have a really special lineup of folks here for you today, so I will get right to introducing them so we can eventually get to your questions. So first of all, I do want to flag just a little note. If and when the congressman comes, we will pause and welcome him, and he will talk whenever he wants, basically, and then we will get back to our conversation. So just to give you a little bit of a heads up on that. Okay, and so let's go ahead and get going. Just so you know, these four experts today, they will cover Latino civic engagement, they will cover technology, digital organizing, broadcasting, addressing mis and disinformation in our communities, specifically with a focus in Latino media. We also are joined, I'm sorry, y'all, before I introduce everyone, also want to thank CHCI for just making this conversation happen at the Tech Summit. It's really important, and we're glad that you're here. Okay, first off, we have Valentina Pereda. She's the communications director when we all vote. If anyone wants to do like a little snap, a little power clap, please, we invite you to that. Great, thank you. Welcome, Valentina.
Thank you.
We also have Iria Puyosa. She's a senior research fellow at the Atlantic Council Digital Forensic Research Lab, and also representing the Omidyar Network. Thank you so much. Welcome. We're also joined by Lynn Claudy, Senior Vice President, Technology for the National Association of Broadcasters. Welcome, Lynn. And finally, someone who I've had a chance to organize alongside, Jose Alonso Munoz, the Deputy Communications Director at United We Dream. Welcome. Jose, let me start with you. I know that United We Dream has done some research around dis and misinformation, so would love to get your perspective on how do we engage Latino youth, especially in civic engagement spaces, given mis and disinformation in digital spaces?
Yeah, so I think the best place to start is recognizing that we really have to meet young people and young Latinos where they're spending most of their time. So from some of the research that we've done, we know that a lot of Latinos are spending a lot of time getting their news, hanging out on places like YouTube, they're on social media, and so we actually had the opportunity to do some research earlier this year, but specifically about Latino media consumption as it pertains to immigration. And one of the key things that we learned from that was there's actually a really big gender divide between young Latinos and young Latinas, whereas young Latinos are actually spending a lot of their time online engaging in gaming. It's like they're playing a lot of video games. And I have younger brothers, so I've seen that in real life, but it was really interesting to see that come to life in our research. And so one of the ways that we deployed that research in the short term was we did a really in-depth language analysis. I spent a lot of time this year on Twitch and Discord and other platforms where gamers spend a lot of time, and try to kind of learn how do they communicate, what is driving them. And the question that I tried to ask was how do gamers build community? How do they make sense about community and belonging? Amazing. And used that research in the short term to actually create a 15-second GOTV ad that we ran during this election cycle that was styled after a video game. So you had someone who was doing these hard challenges. They were like, this is hard, but we're gonna do it. They're jumping over obstacles, and at the end, they have their ballot, and they're like, I did it, I did this thing. And so we specifically targeted that ad on YouTube, because that's where young Latinos are. We specifically targeted to 18 to 35-year-old men, and we specifically placed that ad in zip codes that were over 70% Latino from the 2020 census. And so that was one really specific way where we went out, we learned a little bit of information, wanted to learn a little bit more, and then really deployed it in a way that was really authentic and met our audience where they were hanging out.
That's great.
Amazing.
That's remarkable.
Amazing.
Thank you. Valentina, let's stay here for a moment and help us understand a little bit more around youth turnout and what is important in understanding what drives youth turnout.
So we just finished the midterm elections. Obviously, votes are still being counted, but the winning narrative right now is how young people turned out. It wasn't the largest youth turnout for midterms. It's actually the second largest next to 2018. But we definitely saw young people show up in, not that all states don't matter, but in states that really, really mattered for us, like Pennsylvania, like Arizona, like Nevada, et cetera. So I think we're in a really interesting time in history with young people where they are hyper-connected, and there's just so much information coming our way. I've been doing political comms since 2010, so I'm not a Gen Zer, I'm a millennial, but I think that the big turning moment for me was in 2016. I was Hillary's press secretary in Florida. I'd been doing communications at the White House. I'd been doing communications in the way that we had been taught to do political communications, which was, reach out to your beat reporters, the TV stations, the radio stations, et cetera, right? And when 2016 happened for me, I was just floored by how wrong we'd gotten the communications and the polling, really. So I won't get into this, but I kind of self-exiled from political comms. I actually left the country and everything because I just knew, I think that for those of us that are in communications, we haven't seen a shift, such a dramatic shift in communications as we have in the past 10 years. You know what I mean? When before there was a way to do political comms and campaigns, which we all knew that's the mainstream media, as they say. Now, what I like to tell folks and remind them is that information is completely decentralized. There's a lot of talk about decentralization now, with crypto and blockchain and stuff like that, but we've got to talk about the decentralization of information, right? Where before you had what we viewed as what was a trusted news media, and there were fact checkers, and there was a whole process that doesn't exist anymore. Now, as Jose mentioned, on YouTube, anyone can put on a green screen of a newsroom, as a lot of YouTubers, Edie, I'm sure you have found them, and say that they're communications. So with youth, I think we're seeing some promising leads into, especially Gen Zers, and I would say Gen Zers and millennials are youth too, because, under 40, come on, 40 doesn't need 30. But I would say that they're young, the young voters, the youth vote too, but, they're not going to, when was the last time y'all watched CNN, honestly, or turned on the TV? Honestly, right? Like, people just don't turn on their TVs anymore. They're not going to the big media outlets and stations and what we have as a society accepted as trusted voices for information. So everything now is decentralized. It's been a free-for-all for the past, couple of years, as Iria knows, and now we're trying to figure it out, right? So for me, when I think about young people in voting and communications, I love the work that you've been doing, because when I go to people, I say, hey, what's our YouTube strategy? People just look at me blankly. And I'm like, why is this a blank stare? Why is there not a robust, well thought out YouTube plan that we invest in? Like we invest in, TV ads and print ads and radio ads. And, why haven't we done that work after 2016, after 2018, after 2020, all the warnings? So I think that we have a very good group of voters that are very engaged, but we just have to figure out how to meet them where they are. And that's going to take a lot of niche work versus before you were a communications director. You had to know how to pitch to print, raid. You have to have the strategy for everything. Now I actually think that communications teams need to be very niche. So who is your YouTube comms director? Who is your TikTok director? Who is your Twitch director? Because all of those platforms have different ways of doing things in different communities that require a specific skill for that particular platform in that mini community. So being a communications director today is dramatically harder than it was 10 years ago, but we're going to figure it out. So.
Thank you, Valentina. And what a way to preface to our conversation, Lynn, which is that, you represent America's broadcasters, a platform that's been longstanding and credible for a long time. I wonder if you can tell us a little more about what's unique about this platform and how it approaches civic engagement, trust, and community building.
Well, thank you. And I think maybe this is a little bit of an alternative view. And I'm a tech guy, so I want to talk about broadcast technology and how it's changing to meet people where they are. But I think a little bit of level setting on the broadcast industry might be appropriate to start out. Right now, television certainly considered conventional media, but it's fairly prevalent as a source of community outreach. News is what TV stations are all about, and news is big and increasing. Nielsen studies show over the past 10 years, there are 35% more local news programs than there were 10 years ago. In Spanish-speaking local news programs, that number increases to 200%. So news is big, and people do watch the news with what they believe are the trusted news source. Knight Foundation says 60% of people rely more on local news than national news outlets or social media for news they can trust or who to tell them to vote in local elections. So it is trusted, it is local, and the real differentiator with television and radio is that it's free. No one watches TV anymore, but the numbers tell a different story. Nationally, about 15% of the population watches television over the air using an antenna, and that breaks down into three kinds of groups. One, that those that just have an antenna, that's a pretty small number. Those that have an antenna and subscribe to something like Sling Media or YouTube that has essentially the internet equivalent of cable TV, that's a pretty small number too. But the biggest number are those that have an antenna and some kind of subscription video on demand service, Netflix sort of thing. And of that, the significant number are in the Hispanic areas and the younger populations Why? Because they want news, but they don't want to be saddled with a cable subscription, or they are moving from time to time, or they don't have the money. So that's a big population that is still tied to television and free television. So it's a good situation with television, but you want to move with the times. And there is a new standard for television called Next Gen TV. It's a new system. It's available to a little over 50% of the US population now. There are receivers available. This is not compatible with old television, but Sony, LG, Samsung, Hisense, and soon others will be providing television sets that can receive Next Gen TV. It is available here in Washington, D.C. NBC, Fox, ABC, CBS, and PBS are all available. And this does television much, much better in any aspect you want to name, but the one I want to concentrate on is that it is based on internet protocol and converges very nicely with internet content. So for the first time, people can watch TV and draw in extra content from the internet, overlaid on top of the current program. So you take that trusted media program, and they can bring in statistics and additional information from the internet. And I'll give you an example. We did a pilot program with Scripps Media and the News Literacy Project, which Scripps is part of. And in our pilot program, we were able to show news programs, and then overlaid on top of someone who was being interviewed, you'd take the video and squeeze it down and have an L bar of information coming up, and you could get all kinds of information about the person who was talking. So when you were interviewing someone, you could know a lot about that person, what their history was, or various aspects of their resume, so that you could see, is this a person I can trust? And similarly, you can do quizzes about educating the public about, do you think this is fake news or fake video or not, and why, and have the results immediately come up on screen for someone. So these are things we could never do before with the one-way medium of broadcasting. But by tying it in with internet content, you now have an interactive experience in a medium that is local, trusted, and free. So we're pretty excited about that.
That's great, and that's a helpful input. I think, my training is in political organizing, and even in that training, I think a lot about what treatments we have of voters, right? And that even within a community, there's a lot of layered treatments, but also there's a lot of difference in the community based on regional difference, based on age, based on gender. And so I think I love that we're having a discussion that has varying perspectives, because I think it just reflects, media is one platform of how folks experience life. What I do is political, right? But what I've learned there is that none of us are reduced, right, to one sort of part of our identity. And so understanding those nuances is, I think, reflected even in this conversation. So appreciate it. Okay, Iria. Share with us a little more on certain technologies, like how are certain technologies used to overcome barriers to information? Where are the trusted spaces for this from your perspective, and where are the emerging spaces?
Well, we already talked about the emerging spaces, both Jose and Valentina mentioned it. We are increasingly seeing people, especially young people, moving to video platforms. Actually, I started to see YouTube spas. It's already over. Now everyone is in TikTok. Everyone is moving to other platforms, more niche, more fragmented, and that is a challenge. Another trend we are seeing is people moving to closed spaces. Before we had, kind of open social media. Now we see as an open and mainstream social media like Facebook, Instagram, even Twitter and YouTube. And recently, and it shows in the recent elections, people were looking for news in places like TikTok, but also people have been increasingly influenced for the organized and their political engagement in platforms that 5 years ago nobody was looking at least here in the United States. In other parts of the world, in Latin America and Southeast Asia, messaging access was already big. Now it's coming here. Now people are using Telegram and WhatsApp to organize their communities here in the United States. And it's something we have been working in the DFR lab, trying to understand that uses and how that is a completely multimedia space. And that's the vision we have been talking about, mainstream media, niche platforms, kind of more consolidated social media is blurring in WhatsApp. So people share everything from what they listen into the radio, what they got in TikTok, what they got in their Facebook group, what they get in their neighborhood, that is mixed together. And that is very promising in the sense they get a lot of agency to the people using the platform to organize themselves, so to organize with the community, but also had a lot of risk related with misinformation, but also with issues of data protection, issues of privacy. So we are entering in a world even more complex with more intersections, with every person had their own diet, their own information diet. Is even talking about demographics, like people this age is too wide to what people is doing. So everyone else had a different diet. And it intersects what our friends, our relatives, our coworkers are doing, making it even more complex for those who try to influence opinions for good or for bad.
That I love the diet framework because I think that really succinctly lets us know, like, it's actually pretty complicated, and that's helpful. Okay, y'all, so we have a little extra time, and I want to open up the conversation a little more to include all of you, or those of you who want to be part of the conversation. We are ready for some Q&A, and then the rest of us will have a closing couple minutes at the end, but would love to just open up questions from the audience now. Be brave. Be curious. Yes, and then just let us know who you'd like to, if it's for everyone or, got it.
Buenas tardes. My
Buenas.
name is Señorita Lake. I'm with the Global Educational Experience, but that's my business. But I'm an educator by the day. I teach Spanish, and during the pandemic, I was able to leverage social media, and I was able to get all my students to come to class on Zoom because I would announce it on Instagram. But you get what I'm saying? So what I notice is, especially with our youth, I'm in a fellowship right now where I'm the youth advocate and family advocate in education. But something that I'm noticing is, like, given that the internet is now a human right, right? How are we giving the children and their parents the tools to, like, navigate, like, the real platforms? Because, like, I hear what you said about YouTube, right? How is some kids go to TikTok, but it's like prefer platforms that people are using, right? So, like, even if you have a WhatsApp group, I've done conversations on WhatsApp and I'm able to, like, download everything that we talked about. So how do you guys, since we're talking about the youth, how do you guys reach the youth in these different platforms, right? So we have the community platforms, el Facebook, right? El Facebook. We have the social platforms, and that's cater more to, like, I think, Gen Z, my babies, right? So TikTok, Instagram, I don't know the other one. And then, yeah. Twitch, I don't know how
Discord.
to say and the closed platform ones is like the WhatsApp, and I don't know what else they use. So how do you guys navigate that with the youth when you're trying to reach them, but also, like, how do you empower them to exercise correct digital citizenship? Because that's the key part. I've been to a few conversations here today, amazing, all of them, but something that I'm noticing is technology and education are both up in the air. There's no standards, and also global climate change. So given that we don't really have a standard for how we are moving as a human society, how do you guys feel that your companies and your projects, how do you guys navigate that and gain relationships?
Great question. Who would like to start?
Well,
It looks like you.
everything you said is correct. I mean, I think that we are all, like I said, the past 10 years, how long have we had Instagram, Facebook for? Like 10, 15 years? Especially Instagram. I feel like Instagram really changed the game, and YouTube too. And it just, we are all as a human species trying to also grasp how to operate, how our brains must operate with this thing that we're physiologically maybe not even ready for, because technology develops at a much faster pace than we do. So I will talk to you about organizing, because we don't do work on education, how to use the internet correctly. But with regards to organizing, so we did a panel where we were talking about digital organizing, but the name of the panel was From the Screens to the Streets, right? Because I think that with organizing, we should spend a lot of time in all of these different virtual communities. And like I said, each outlet has its own, right? We can do a lot of that work, but Elon Musk just bought Twitter, right? You can get deplatformed with the blink of an eye. Like when we all vote tomorrow, most of our following is on Instagram. They can shut down our Instagram tomorrow, and then what do we do, right? So I think that for us that are in social movements, and that's why I love what Iria said about WhatsApp and stuff, is our communications can't just be reliant on these major companies like Twitter and Instagram. It has to start there, but then we need to figure out how to pull those virtual communities into physical spaces, right? Because number one, we can get deplatformed at any moment. Things are way volatile, right? We don't know what the state of social media is at any given moment. Elon Musk can buy your platform tomorrow, and then you lose. There's people there that are losing years and years worth of community building on their platform. So I think to answer your question, number one, I think that social movements, like I said, when you look at a communications director, I think that it's like, I always found it funny when people would say the Latino vote director. I'm like, what the hell does that even mean? Like the Latino vote, like that, it's such a huge group, like the Black vote, huge group of people, and everybody's so different. So same thing with communications, like things are changing so differently that I think that if any of y'all are interested in getting into movement comms or political comms, yes, do your internships in Congress, learn how to do news clips and pitch stories and stuff like that. But I would encourage you to look at the platform that really speaks most to you. Maybe it's TikTok. And really try to learn how to use that platform and how to be a really effective communicator on that particular platform. Because let me tell you, I'm always at my job. I still have not found the great TikToker that I've been looking for. So if any of y'all is that, hit me up and we can talk about possibly hiring you, because I need TikTokers. You know what I mean? And then even though YouTube is a thing of the past, I like YouTube.
Still is huge.
It's still huge, and let me tell you why I like YouTube. TikTok, you have a 60-second video. We're all struggling with focus here, right? YouTube, you can get somebody watching your video for 20, 30, 40 minutes. So if I'm trying to teach somebody about the importance of a local election, or how government works, or what gerrymandering is, how gerrymandering impacted Florida's elections right now, unlike any other place we've seen before, it's hard for me to explain that with a 60-second TikTok video in a way that you really feel informed and you want to do something. So that's why I'm so fascinated by successful YouTubers. And then the next step is, Telegram, WhatsApp, Discord, because those are the communities that then you can pull from the internet and bring them to the streets to actually show up to vote or do organizing and do that and stuff like that. So I think, like I said at the top, I'm still trying to figure it out. I feel every day as a comms director, I feel like I know maybe less than I knew yesterday, because every day we keep getting proven different things. So I think we're all learning, but I think instead of just trying to be the director of comms for everything,
we got to start doing more niche comms and really focus our energies on that.
I would like to add something, addressing your question. I think we need to keep learning from users.
Yeah.
So before we try to establish standards of what is the appropriate use of some platform, we need to understand how people are actually using it, what they are getting from it, what is the satisfaction, what is the benefits they are getting from it, and not focus so much on the harms, because we are maybe missing what is important for the communities have been formed there. So a lot of my work is that, looking at what people are doing in the platforms, what is the benefits they are getting, what is there for them, what they are there, what is the reason. They are not dumb, they are there for a reason, some benefits is there. After learning that, seeing the trade-off, what they are doing, it has some risk. In the case there are some risks, then we work in policy recommendations, but not for users. For platforms, for governments, those are the ones who have to build the trusted environment. But I can tell the user how to use whatever they try to use. I can tell my teenage son how to use Discord. He used for playing, he used for homework, he used for politics, and that's the way they use it. I can't tell them, no, don't use for that because this is supposed to be only for gaming. Don't talk to strangers. They are going to do it. So they are going to do it. The same thing. You can't tell. So my mother, you don't get gossip in WhatsApp. Why no? So what is it? They had social interaction that is gratifying. So what I need to do is to have recommendations for platform or for government how to enforce security and privacy on those platforms, but don't tell users what to do because they are going to do whatever they want, regardless of what you say today.
Wow, Iria, hot takes. All right. I also would just add that, like, as an organizer, I think a lot about what are the incentives, right? What are the incentives for how folks engage in these spaces, both as a company, but also what are the incentives for users? I think a little bit of what Iria is saying too about what do they get from these spaces. And then what are the one-on-one things that we all care about collectively, even in our IRL lives, right? Like, what are the conducts for how we disagree with each other? What are the ways that we're curious about each other? One of our organizers created a program at our organization called the Truth Brigade, and they engage relationally with people they know. So when they're online and they see some wackadoodle stuff, instead of alienating their friends or saying something really that will potentially like shut down conversations, they try the truth sandwich where it's like, how do you affirm that like you hear them and then offer something that potentially could be more credible for them to see as a counter instead of like kind of being like you're wrong or this is wrong, and then they close with something. So it's like a pretty straightforward like affirm and redirect, which is common in organizing spaces, but they use it with folks they know, so they have some trust, and they use it within their own social networks. But anyways, it's not like anything new that no one else is already trying, but it is a thing that we use through our Truth Brigade and how they engage with their local friends online, which is maybe another way to visualize a response to your question. So thank you. Other questions from the audience? All right, you are stacked. Oh, you're next. Okay, and then this fella's stacked, and then someone should look out for this side of the room.
Okay, so first of all, I love something that's happening right now, and it's the fact that we're talking about tech in this case, as a tool for like empowerment of communities, which is definitely like a way to use tech, I think, with a lot of intentionality, right? Because it can be used for distraction, it can be used to waste our times and to not be too constructive with our souls. It can also be used to build. It can also be used to empower our communities. Yeah. In this case, like we're talking about social media, great, like it can be a tool of education for our communities to learn how to leverage actually, like tech to solve, like problems in their communities. Like I see how artificial intelligence now, for instance, is being used in a ethical way per se. So we can actually, turn it around, even if, and this is my assumption, originally it was not designed for that, but with intentionality, we can actually turn it against it, right? And, I think that's perfect. And like all of the messages that you have shared. So I know because like I spoken with some people in the room here, we have a lot of social entrepreneurs around here. Like they're leading their own social justice organizations. And like, this is very, very, very important. So can you share with us some strategies on how we can leverage actually, like all of these platforms in order to help empower our communities? And can you share some strategies that you think have worked?
I'm happy to start.
Go for it,
I
Jose.
think when I think about sort of the work that United We Dream and United We Dream Action has done, I think a lot about the fact that the movement that we've built is powered by undocumented young people who at one point were looking for a community.
Mm-hmm.
And when we were sort of building that in 2008, a lot of that community was happening online. I mean, I remember when I applied for DACA, when I went to find information about it, I went to message boards. Mm-hmm. And so the platforms are really there to serve sort of the end of a need in a way. And I think the end goal is not necessarily about the platforms itself, but it's about what can they facilitate within and building community. Yeah. And so I think one of the things that I would say to the question that you asked is, how can you take the online action of building community and turn that into offline action? And so building really intentional opportunities for folks to make those authentic connections that they might not have otherwise made online, and empower them to take them offline. Yep. And so that looks like in a lot of different ways. This cycle, we were able to run some really interesting connections with influencers on TikTok. Mm-hmm. So we reached out to a certain number of influencers, and there was a variety of different things that we asked them to do. But one of the things that we asked them to do was to really use their network to invite people into joining United We Dream Action Squad, which was calling voters in different states. And so we really leveraged the built-in platforms that some of these content creators already had. Because like you said, I love the social entrepreneur of it, because that's what it is, right? Like they're building and they're amassing sometimes millions of people who are following them. And so really acknowledging the trust that's already built in that and trying to turn that into some offline action.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, heavy +1. Yeah, go ahead, Lynn.
I'll give you an example of leveraging the broadcast platform that involved distance education. We learned a tremendous amount about distance education during the pandemic on different platforms, but we also heard the horror stories about kids that did not have access to broadband and could not participate in classes, and had to be in the parking lot of the library to do their homework, all those kinds of things. So we thought, well, how can we leverage the broadcast system, which is free, and still be able to do distance education? So we did a pilot program with Howard University, and they run a charter school called Howard Middle School. And the idea was you could get a low-cost set-top box, and using the same distance education platforms that are used on the internet, all the lessons and all the homework could be downloaded to a student over the air for free to a small set-top box, and they would do everything through a small keyboard and the remote of their television set. But broadcasting is not two-way, so how for a home that does not have broadband access, how do you get their homework scores and test scores back to the school? And we came up with a way where you could, using this little set-top box that would be made available to students, you create a QR code. The QR code shows up on your television set. You take a picture of it with a phone. The phone doesn't have to be broadband enabled, but as long as you can send a picture back to the school as a text message or a message format of one type or another, that student who didn't pay anything and did not have broadband access could get their homework and test scores back to the school and do all their stuff online, not have to be there from the awful hours of 9 to 3 or whatever the school hours are. So we thought that was an interesting way of leveraging, this is all next-gen TV technology.
Very cool.
To be able to bring a disenfranchised population into the part of society that still suffers from the digital divide, and it's not an insignificant number.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a great example of resourcing students and their families. Thank you, Lynn. Question right here.
Sure. So we heard how the youth showed up to vote in 2018 and this midterm as well in huge numbers. we heard how in 2018 and this year the youth showed up to vote in huge numbers. And we've seen the first Gen Z person elected to Congress in Maxwell Frost. We've seen another Gen Z person on Miami School Board, Luisa Santos.
Yes.
And I'm curious what we're seeing about our digital democracy that will enable a future where Gen Z not only votes, but seizes power. And what are the trends? Like, what are you seeing that can help us recruit Gen Z to run for office?
Well, let's look at the Gen Z voter turnout rate right now. I think it was, these midterms, it was at, in the midterms, it was at 27%. In 2020, I think it was 50% youth voter turnout. And when we saw, you know, we've seen what has happened with 2020, and now we're going to see what's going to happen with 22. 2020 alone, you know, we elected the first Black woman to the Supreme Court. Sorry, we appointed the first Black woman to the Supreme Court. We passed the Investment Reduction Act, which is the largest climate investment in the nation's history. I mean, these are things that young people really, really care about. So we're starting to see the results. But let me remind you that in 2020, we did see historic turnout numbers in the youth vote, in the Black vote. But as a result, we had to face more than 500 voter suppression bills, right? Like voter suppression, like just shot through the roof after 2020, voter suppression efforts. So anytime that you see more young people or people of color voting, you will be met with, you know, a response in this white supremacist system, unfortunately, that we operate in. So how can we get more people engaged? So I started with the youth turnout. 50% in 2020, 27% in these midterms. I mean, we have to show that they are going to continue to turn out. And I don't know if you're from Miami, but I live in Miami. And Florida is a state to me that I will never understand why it is the way that it is. When you see the youth numbers, when you see the diversity, but it really is that it's a disengagement thing. It's how do we get to them, right? So I wish I had a good answer for you. I think that communications has to be increasingly decentralized, especially in campaigns. You know, a campaign can't have just a state comms director. Like it's difficult because, like I said, everything is so decentralized, especially with young people. So I think that, as Iria said, we need to do a better job at. One of the things that I've been pushing for a lot has been we don't have a virtual map. We don't have a map of virtual communities. Like we don't know what communities exist online. We don't know where they are. We have not done a good, you do, but like, send me that information, because if we can catalog those virtual communities, then we have a better way at really targeting them in a way that I think will have a better impact to actually turning them out in real life. Because what's the point of everything? Like, we live in two realities. We live in the real world and in the virtual world. And we can't just live in the virtual world as we have. We got to come back to the real world. So that's I think with us, like, we're trying to figure out how to get people back to the real world through the virtual world. But I think that the way to do that is that instead of doing blanket communication strategies that, oh, this is what's going to get the Latino vote, put Mark Anthony on an ad. Like, you know, celebrities don't have the impact that they used to have before. Now we have to go to influencers, and not just influencers. Now we have to go to micro-influencers, even smaller communities, right? Because it's not the celebrity that's going to turn out people to vote. It might be the influencer that has 10, 15, 20,000 followers, but diehard followers that will do whatever that person will tell them to do locally. So everything is changing right now, and I think it's an amazing opportunity for people getting into the industry to figure out where they fit and see what they can bring forth, because everything that we thought we knew, I'm sorry to say, not TV, TV's not dead. I meant for young people, But everything, the way we've been doing things is changing dramatically and very quickly. And so if we want to get with the times and get more, and young people want to vote, because we see them, you know, they're like, trying to, like, you know, but I have a lot of hope in young people, and I know that they care about issues tremendously, and we just have to figure out how to build the right community spaces for them, and we're doing it.
So. I would add, whenever you think about engagement within an electorate, right? So right now you're specifically asking about young voters, but I think if we can nerd out for a sec, right?
Yeah.
So when I think about your question, it's a good one, and also it's a dynamic one, right? Every single election cycle is different, right? Even comparing our numbers now to 2018 is different. 2018 had historic turnout because it was responding to that current set of political conditions, right? It was responding to the 2016 election, right? Which for a lot of Americans was an election that they rejected, right? And so that first midterm, from especially young voters who voted Democratic, they responded at scale, at a historic scale. And I think when we think about engaging the electorate, we have to be really careful to not create this sort of high watermark every single cycle for it to be meaningful, because otherwise we undermine our own power, right? If you look at investments in the battlegrounds, right, in the big Senate races from this cycle, young people, Latinos, women, like all kinds of people who were nervous about the democracy showed up. And so I think that's like my first lesson, is being really mindful of how we even evaluate success election by election. And then I would say, like, strategically, whenever I think about any electorate, I think about, one, what is our long-term relationship with them? Not in this cycle, but cycle over cycle. Two, what are our investments, right? How much money are you spending? How early are you spending money? Three, what are your policy deliverables? How does this community, beyond what you're communicating to them in a political way, understand your commitment to them? Be it federal policy, be it the way that you assemble your staff, be it whatever receipts you need, but people need receipts in addition to communication. And then finally, I would say, like, who's running for office? I bet you if what happened in Dobbs, right, when Roe was, when we heard about Roe, when it was leaked, if that had happened before a lot of people announced running for office, so end of last year instead of in June, think of all the seats that would have been contested fully by both parties. And so that's my challenge to all of you, especially because we have a lot of young, I hope, aspiring entrepreneurs, organizers, public servants, is that we can only create conditions for change if we're a part of it. And that can look like a lot of different ways, but it also looks like running for office, taking a chance, doing the training, getting the mentorship to be effective in evaluating these political conditions. And I will sign up if anyone's ever interested either in running for office or thinking about political organizing. I'd love to help. We want to talk about your politics, but I would love to help anyone who is like interested in public service, because I think also taking on that challenge of running ourselves. I mean, when I heard Maxwell Frost's story, the first Gen Z elected member to the House, to Congress from Florida, I mean, his story is remarkable. He was raised by his mother and his grandmother, and when he talked to his mother who gave birth to him, she said to him, "I had you at the most vulnerable time of my life." Wow. And that sparked him to finally raise his hand and say, "I'm going to run for office, even though this is one of the scariest political times of our life." Right? And so, like, whatever that is for each of you, whether it's purpose, whether it's curiosity, whether it's local, you don't like the way something is, be really curious first. Strategy, big picture, not just tactical, because tactics change every cycle, right? But be curious about your strategy, and then figure out how you fit into it and how you could be well-suited to change the conditions. So again, that is a real offer for anyone who's interested in running for office or wanting to run political organizing efforts. Okay, let's move on to more questions, because we have 8 minutes, 6 minutes. So one more question, and then I'd love to give our panelists a chance to close with any remarks they'd like to close with. Dun, dun, dun. We'll do the 3-second rule. Okay, then we will close. Iria, we'll start with you, and Lynn, we'll end with you. Does that work?
Sure.
Great.
Well, trying to summarize, I see in the room is a lot of interest in politics, and I've been working on politics for a long time, most from civil society organizations and grassroots organizations, how they interpret, how they create movements. That's what resonate with me when you say about the virtual communities, because I started to do research on social media because I was helping organizations, movements, grassroots to use those tools. And as you say, the tools are changing all the time. So we started with blogs, and now we are moving to Discourse. And you just open Mastodon, and everything is changing. Every day we have something different. And all these tactics are ever evolving. But what we need to understand is what drives the community organization. What is the glue? What is the identity of those communities? What are the values they share? And particularly in this context, United States here, right now, I'm seeing that process of politics be driven by belief, by values, and not by partisanship. So you people in particular are not registering for any party. So they are not Democrat, they are not Republican. They are turning out to vote in huge numbers, but they are disenfranchised for parties. So they care about issues, they care about policies, they care about values, and that moves them in particular situations. And it may change next year. So we need to use these social media spaces actually for understanding what those things are moving the people. It's not only for putting there our content. So you got your video, you got your messaging, and putting there because the people is there. No, actually, I'm more interested in going there to listen.
Yes.
What people are talking about, what they are motivated, what they want to do. And on that, you build your platform of ideas. And from that platform of ideas, you see who are the political actors who may back that. So a completely different process, so all bad words. But I think it's what may work in the future. I guess you are interested in the future more than the past.
Thank you, Edie. Wow.
I agree.
Well, I work in politics. When We All Vote is nonpartisan, so our mission is to educate people about, obviously, voting rights. There's a huge assault on voting rights in this country, and just get them, engaged in why they should care about politics. When we think about elections, I think that the broad number of people just equate elections to presidential and Congress, and then they think that government is dead, nothing else exists. And I like to remind people that 99% of elections in this country are actually at the state and local level. So what happens in DC, even though what happens in the Supreme Court, and Congress has implications, but really what happens in DC is minimal to the opportunity that happens in the states and at the local level. 99% of elections are at the state and local level. So I think when, what I like to tell organizers in this day and age is, yes, especially with the Supreme Court. You brought up Dobbs. I follow a lot what the Supreme Court has been doing with the Voting Rights Act, for example. I mean, the Voting Rights Act has been getting chipped away for the past 10 years. It's the most important civil rights, most consequential piece of civil rights legislation this country has passed is the 1965 Voting Rights Act. It's what protects us federally. It's federal guidelines to protect our access to the ballot box, and that's been getting chipped away by the Supreme Court. But what that means is that all of the power is getting pushed back to the states. So then when I think about organizing now, I really, and communications, I just focus a lot on the hyper-local and the smaller virtual communities. It's not so much about the influencer with 10 million followers anymore, right? It's about that influencer, like I said, that has the 20,000 followers in Miami, Florida, maybe a page in Miami, Only Date or whatever, those different pages. And so who are those people that I can go talk to? Because they control that Miami market for me. And so my parting message to you is think about, if you're in politics, think about the power of state and local, and think about how communications is getting decentralized, how everything we thought about working with celebrities or mega influencers, even that is changing. We have to become more granular, more niche, right? And I think that's actually a beautiful thing because I don't believe in the master of none. I'm the Latino vote director. I know I'm Venezuelan American. How am I gonna know what, Guatemalan Americans care about, or Mexican Americans, or, my brain can only handle this refugee crisis that my people are going through. So I think that we need to decentralize power too and decision making and let people pick niche things that they can become experts at and then work together that way. So
thank you, Valentina.
Yeah.
I think I will close by just really centering us on the power that we have as young Latinos. Every 30 seconds, a Latino turns 18 and becomes eligible to vote. And that really is important as we think about this idea of digital democracy. We've spent a lot of time here today talking about the platforms and the way that we can use them and the way that we can leverage them. We actually have a lot of power over the platforms, and you mentioned Elon Musk. What has been happening with Twitter over the last week is extremely dangerous to democracy. The fact that someone could pay $8 and pretend to be, honestly, I was afraid that someone's going to pretend to be, a Cortez Masto or and go on Twitter and say something that fuels disinformation to advance a political agenda, which is really, really dangerous. And so it's important for us to recognize that because this is a space where young people are spending a lot of time, remembering that we have a lot of power. The only reason why these platforms are able to thrive is because we give them the opportunity to do so. YouTube, Twitter, Instagram, they would be nothing without us. They are not creating their own content to put out. They are not the ones that are making the connections with people, that are getting the clicks, that are getting the likes, that are making people go to the platforms. And so I think part of my parting word for all of you is when we're meeting people where they're at and when we're doing this organizing, I think it's so, so important to recognize that those spaces are only as good as we allow them to be. And so when you're in those spaces, making sure that you're building those relationships, you're moving them offline.
Yes.
And when you are staying online, you're doing everything that you can to push back against so many of the harmful policies that some of them are enacting, and speaking up about those and empowering folks to have those conversations as well so that they know truly what's at stake.
Thank you, Jose. Lynn?
Well, I'm an optimist, so if I say the problem's going to get worse, I mean it in a positive way. and I bring that up because I think access to information is only increasing for all sectors of the population. In cell phones, we've gone from 4G, now moving to 5G. People are already talking about 6G and what that means. Wi-Fi speeds have gone through the roof. Cable standards for broadband are going to allow 10 gigabit per second speeds before the end of the decade. And broadcasting standards are evolving. The thing that all these delivery mechanisms have in common is internet protocol. It brings them all together. And we're moving, I think, towards an age where all media converges, at least from the consumer point of view. They're not going to know where the TikTok's coming from or where their program is originating from. All these disparate methods of communication can communicate and interoperate with each other, and that's a good thing. But the old adage that content is king is still going to be there. The issues of what can you trust, where do you get valid sources of information are going to be something we continue to wrestle with. But it'll be in an age of abundance, not one where we're strained to find the information that we're looking for. It's just working through the sea of noise to get the right stuff. So good luck to us all.
Thank you. And if you could join me in thanking our panelists today.